take Chris.
Hello.
Aloha! Wow, very good. I'm Christopher Sabine. I'm a professor of oceanography at the University of Hawaii, and I represent the program committee and will be hosting this morning's introduction.
I'm Sabrina Spay. I'm professor at the École Normale Supérieure in Paris, and I'm representing the program committee for which I was a co-chair.
So on behalf of the program committee and the organizers, I'd just like to wish you a very welcome, iko momai. I also want to point out that one of the guiding principles in organizing this meeting was we wanted to promote diversity. We just love the diversity of all the different perspectives that we can introduce today, and from all different aspects, whether it's gender or the culture that you're representing or the scientific perspective, or whether you're with industry or a stakeholder. We just really want you all to engage and be a part of the contributions to this workshop. We also will do our best to be as inclusive as possible. With 1,500 of you, it's a bit difficult, but we really are making an effort to try and get everyone's thoughts and opinions included.
So, Ocean Community, the program committee, is very proud of you, very honored of the effort, momentum, and positive energy you have put to build these ocean ops. And you show up very numerous, and probably many of you have been already putting a lot of effort in writing the white papers, and you think that you are done, right? You are in Hawaii, Honolulu, there is the beach, the warm ocean, but no. Not yet. It's not the case. You still need to work a little bit because we have to build the next decade, and this happens now. So we still need you, especially young scientists, but we need also the stakeholders, government, industry, also the indigenous people, to really build this ocean decade that we need to look at, because we are facing many challenges, and we need to answer these challenges for the future we want. So during the rest of the week, we will discuss, formulate, initiate an ocean revolution to meet all these challenges.
So this workshop is a little bit different from your AGU meeting or your ASLO or Ocean Sciences. We're really expecting you to contribute to the outcomes here, and we're not looking into the past like in those other meetings, summarizing the work that's already been done. The purpose of this workshop is to look forward, to try and plan what we're going to do over the next decade, and we really need your thoughts and input on that. So I want to explain over the next hour, we're going to go through the workshop structure and explain how it all works. But before we do that, I want to really celebrate the wonderful opening that we had yesterday, and we're going to ask our panelists to give us our leaders, session leaders from yesterday, to give us a few thoughts on summarizing the sessions that they led. We have with us here Craig McLean, Margaret Linen, and Tony Lee. So we'll start with Craig's summary of his session yesterday.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Chris, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We had, I thought, a very good conversation yesterday, many comments coming from the floor and some comments coming from Slido, but our topic was connecting ocean observations to the user community. And we had a diverse panel. Many of you were here, and I thank you for attending, and those of you who weren't, just to recap, we had Bronte Tilbrook, who came from CSIRO in Australia with quite a proud history of science and climate and ocean observing. Nellie Florida from Indonesia, where we have some rather unique and compressed challenges because of the geology of Indonesia and the ocean construct of mixing and the like. We had Sarah Perkey from Scripps Institute of Oceanography, where her expertise in deep ocean and carbon was explained as a value of observing. David Miller from Fugro, a very progressive commercial company that has been offering its talents not just for commercial availability, but to be beneficently donating scientific data to the global community. And then Vladimir Rubinin, who is the executive director of the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission, the IOC, part of the UN family that is focusing on ocean science. So we had a couple, if I could start with the slide then, please. We had a couple of comments that came up for summation, and maybe the next slide, thanks. There we go. So I'll just offer the highlight here so you can see them as I narrate very quickly. The indigenous voice was loudly heard, and I celebrate the conference organizers for allowing the indigenous community to be so well represented, both culturally, but also in the expression and the value of the science that has been observed for generations and can be reported contemporarily today. We also saw opportunities to close gaps, and ladies and gentlemen, I think we have some gaps in our community. We need to focus on those, and maybe that could be one of the progressive steps of Ocean Obs 19, where we start closing those gaps. I think that it was clearly expressed by a great comment that came out asking, how do you connect with the coastal observers? Where is the coastal observing? I'm not sure that the deep blue water community has a great conversation at all with the inshore coastal community. You should be on each other's Christmas list. You should be working very closely together. There should be a seamless blend between open ocean, deep ocean, and coastal. The compression of issues in the coasts is exceptional, but the signature and knowledge of the global circulation is deep ocean, is open ocean, is blue water. These two communities need to get together. Maybe we can see that happen here. I ask you to please do that. Communicating to the public. We have a challenge to explain what are often complex notions and to explain them plainly to a lay audience, because the lay audience is the standard of communication you need to talk to your governments, your policymakers, and people who have the elected choice to determine the fate and future, though they may not have the science background. So we need to be conversant and fluid in the way that we can communicate to the public. In terms of economic disparity or technological disparity, we have many countries that are spread across the globe, have very important opportunities in front of them, but may not have the economic means or the factual means to go ahead and implement the kind of observing capability that we might recognize they can contribute and could be very important contributors to a global ocean observing system. And in particular, I'm talking about the small island areas but large ocean states, where we have in residence a wonderful ocean observation sentry station in the people of those island nations. And we need to work in order to find, perhaps, is it the adoption of a particular area by an economic power that might be able to lend the technology, the funds, or the capacity development to countries that haven't yet fully developed economically in the sciences. So we need to be looking at this opportunity. The IOC does it, I think, handsomely, but only when the money is made available by the member states. So we need to be looking at how we balance the distribution of mechanics, of scientific sampling, and the ability for communities to assimilate, understand, and then act on that information. Building a global ocean observing system is one of the objectives of the UN Decade of Ocean Science. It is my hope that this body, you folks, can leave here giving to your organizers the intellectual machinery that they need to capture a description of what the global ocean observing system should look like. That doesn't mean that what happens in the Mediterranean looks exactly like what's going to happen in the Central or Southern Pacific. What it does mean is that there's a combination of commonality, and it may be the essential ocean variables, it may be something wider than that, but we need to build a baseline that is standard across the globe, including the Arctic, where we need help, including the Antarctic, but we need to be able to establish something that is fit for purpose, adaptable, capable of receiving additional attributes for measurement, but truly establish a global ocean observing system. And I'll repeat this again, it is my hope that if I can ask that the burden be placed on our conference organizers, including that wonderful man with the big paddle, that we could be looking at the ability to assimilate, take on board in the UN decade your description, and no finer organization exists than this conference to define it. What should that global ocean observing system look like? So that ties the last two, or the penultimate bullets here. Lastly, on solutions. We don't need the discussion as richly developed on what are the key science questions. We need your action-oriented statements. We need your actions that you would offer to say, we are going to do the following. I want to credit and celebrate the people that are involved in the Tropical Pacific Observing discussion, the T-Post 2020 discussion. We have commitments from countries to deploy developed technologies, present technologies, that we're able to have sent out into the Pacific to replace the old observing system. That's exactly what we're looking for. Commitments for action, commitments for deployment, and the types of systems that we're going to celebrate. So I think that captures what we heard yesterday. The indigenous populations need to be heard. Economic disparity is a gap that we need to close. We need to close the gaps in our communities. Gosh, they're creeping up on me. The paddle is still there, though.
I still need to go get the paddle.
All right. So that's pretty much what we heard yesterday, and thanks to the panelists. There it is.
Thank you, Margaret.
The slide, please.
Do we have a clicker?
Okay.
Thank you so much. The panel on successes and opportunities for ocean observing included John Gunn from University of Tasmania, Melissa Iwamoto from the Pacific Islands the Pacific Islands Ocean Observing Network, Juliet Hermes from the South African Environmental Observation Network, Martin Visbeck from Geomar, and Asahiko Taira, president of JAMSTEC. John Gunn led us in understanding how successful we've been over the last decade in developing a fully implemented physical observing system with carbon that we had also developed, really importantly for the future and sustainability of ocean observing, a framework for new observations while maintaining old capabilities. Simplified governance and development of multidisciplinary environmental essential ocean variables. But our successes also include the scientific results that come from the observing, not just the existence of the system. The incredible new technology that we have been seeing on the screens here while we've been waiting for sessions to start and in between sessions, that is really revolutionizing our ability to observe. New data systems to be able to get data from all of these observations to users, whether those are science users, public sector users, government users, more effectively and more efficiently. And then capacity building. And as we said yesterday, we certainly have a long way to go with capacity building, but we have started down that road to really try to ensure that that what we do can be accessed and can be used and can be developed by everybody. Melissa and Julia really helped highlight the fact that observing isn't just for science anymore. It must be fit for purpose. And that means that we need to design taking the needs of users into account and iteratively engaging with them and ensuring that they can use that data. They emphasized the fact that our cataloging of best practices and our investment in making sure that we had documented best practices and metrics to assess progress really allow observing systems to expand into management by new communities of use. Without that, we have created systems that can only be accessed by those that develop them. And then Martin Visbeck really emphasized that there's sort of, even beyond local managers, local water resource and other managers, there are those very high-level government needs, and pointed out that our data was not being used now by countries to report on and assess their delivery on the Sustainable Development Goals because we haven't designed that transition, that handoff between the way that we use data as scientists and the way that they need to access it in order to report on progress. And then finally, Asahiko Taira pointed out that all of our developments, which are so phenomenal over the last decade, are occurring within a really vibrant transformation of other fields, genomics, human science, and technology, and what he called habitability science, and that we should be aware of and engage those other fields so that they understand how important the ocean is in their development as well as ours. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll thank Tony for his succinct comments on.
Thank you. The slide. So for the concept, Shaping the Future of Ocean Observing, we have 8 presentations highlighting examples for the development and accomplishment in the past decade. And those fields include major observing platform, Argo and gliders, and thematic areas such as deep oceans, seafloor mapping, marine genomics, and sea level change, as well as observing approaches from citizen science to integrated observing system. With a tropical example, the TPOS 2020. And so I'm not going to read this. I have one sentence summary for all of this and how this field will shape the next decade of ocean observing. We'll make this available to in the conference website, but I just want to highlight 4 key words here for challenges and opportunities: governance, resources sharing, international coordination and collaboration, and integration across platform, coastal to open ocean, and across discipline. And engaging stakeholder and users for information need, and capitalizing on the science and technology innovations. So these 4 key words, governance and the 3 I's, I will let the man with the paddle to further explain in the context of a conference. And many thanks to the presenter yesterday again. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Tony. Let's thank all of our session leaders one more time for their contributions yesterday. All right, thank you. So, as Tony mentioned, the structure of this workshop was really put together based on particular themes and a particular structure that is kind of centered around these different I's. So at the center of it all is governance, right? We're looking to provide, to get guidance from all of you on how we should move forward over the next decade with these ocean observations. And to feed into that, we have these different themes: interoperability, information, innovation, and integration. Yesterday, the first day, was really focused on another I, inspiration. So the idea yesterday was to share with you the importance of ocean observations and the value of what we are doing and the contribution that that's making to the community and to all of our stakeholders and to the world in general. But now we need to get into details. We need to understand how we can provide the information that's needed for these communities. We need to look at new innovations to better understand and better observe our world in a more efficient and cost-effective way. And we need to integrate all these different approaches, the moving from just a single-use research cruise or single-use observation into a multi-use and multidisciplinary approach to doing ocean observations, and how do we integrate all those things together. So each of the structure of the workshop is really organized around those themes, and we'll bring that out over the next few minutes.
Okay, community white papers. So you did really a great job 2,500 authors, 140 white papers from 79 countries. And actually, these white papers feeds into the conference. You can go to the Ocean Ops or Frontiers website and read them. And we have also prepared a synthesis that you can find on the Ocean Ops websites. Can you go? And what is interesting, we did an analysis of the connectivity between the white papers, is this spaghetti connection. And what you find is that the ocean observation information uses are all connected, and the ocean is one and a whole. So this has been a work done with the first 100 papers that went into the EASY from Fabien Lombard, that is here in the room. And he did also the cloud on the word title. And so you see that really everything is connected, and we are doing an integrated ocean observing system in words, and now we need to build it for real.
Okay, so as we get into the structure, as I mentioned the first day, yesterday, we were basically talking to you. Now we want to reverse that and start to get feedback back from you. The next 3 days are structured similarly so that we can move from speaking at you to getting feedback from you. So the next 3 days each have a similar structure. We'll start off in plenary. Each day, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, is organized around a different theme. So today, we'll have the information day. Tomorrow will be the innovation day. And Thursday will be the integration day. So that's kind of the structure that we want to try and follow and focus on. So while many of you are mostly interested maybe in integration, all of these things kind of tie in, but we want to try and save that for the appropriate day. We're going to start off each day with a set of plenary talks so that we can set the stage and bring out some of the major points that we'd like to discuss throughout that day. So that we'll have a few key speakers that will be providing large-scale, big-picture view of the theme for that particular day. And there will be an opportunity for some discussion and questions and answers. We encourage you to please use Slido and the online resources to ask questions, as well as the using the mics after each of the plenary talks. So after that, we're going to move into our theme panels, right? So the plenary talks are big picture, covering the whole idea of the theme for that day. As we move into the plenary talks, these are going to be where we drill down into a little more specific direction on some of the things that we want to talk about. So for today, we're really going to be focusing on the realities and the opportunities associated with trying to get the information that we collect, the data that we collect, out to the appropriate communities. Tomorrow, we'll be talking about emerging ideas from the integration, or from the innovation idea, and then on the integration, we'll talk about interoperability and governance. So those themes, again, are kind of focused on the panels are focused on the themes for each of those days, and we'll be drilling down into those. The next, after that, we'll have the special sessions, again, drilling down even deeper. These are more specific topics that are associated with the sponsors, things that the sponsors really wanted to get into. So they're very focused parallel sessions that you're welcome to join, encouraged to join, whichever one is you feel most in touch with. Please go there and again, address those issues that our sponsors really wanted to cover. We'll break for lunch, so another aspect of this workshop is we really wanted to leave time for discussion, and just like most meetings, the real work happens during the breaks. And one of the things we heard yesterday evening in our Indigenous section, and it's something that we hear all the time in Hawaii, is the importance of talk story. Sit down, get with someone that you don't know, sit down and talk story, tell them what you do, ask them what they do, and make those connections, because that's vitally important. We heard yesterday again that the importance of making those connections and spending time together to understand each other's perspective. So lunch and during the breaks is a great opportunity to do that. After lunch, then we move into the real meat of the day as we move into the breakout sessions. So we have a number of parallel breakout sessions. Please go pick one of those and go into that. And that's where you're really going to have your opportunity to provide feedback. You know, it's impossible to cover everything, all the points that want to be said in a room full of 1,500 people. So these breakouts are intended to be smaller groups where you can have an opportunity to really talk and provide your feedback. Each of them are organized a little bit differently, but we want you to speak up. It's important that you engage and contribute to those sessions. You were asked before you came to identify which breakout sessions you'd be interested in participating in. We're not going to have the police there to make sure that you're in the right session, but we encourage you to spread out, and we hope that we can get into each of those sessions. We then move into, in the afternoon, move into the showcases and talk more about the posters and an opportunity to go to the, to talk about the posters and to go to the exhibits. The exhibits are actually open all day, as are the posters. Another opportunity, another way to connect with everyone is to go into those, into the showcase room and talk with the vendors that are there during the breaks or during lunch or in this afternoon session. Also go introduce yourself to the posters presenters.
I must say that in the exhibit, so you will have a mix of posters, exhibitions, and also art events. And every day there will be some community artists of our community that will make some performance, and every day will be different. So come and also enjoy this mixture of innovation, science, and art. So in parallel, there will be some special events you have on your program, and every day from today to Thursday, you will have some special events, and you can join in parallel to the exhibit, the showcase moment. So I encourage you to go. There are some of them that are really important, and please come in.
So Friday is a slightly different structure. So Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday really are the, again, the meat of the meeting where we're running to get your input. Friday is where we try to pull it all together. So in the half-day session we have in the morning, we're going to have various input and feedback from the different communities that are here. And all of this is intended to try and feed into making specific recommendations and putting together a path forward. We want to make sure that everyone has a voice. We're going to do our best to try and get input from the students and early career communities, the broader community, the sponsors. Everyone hopefully will have an opportunity to provide that input. We'll have a final discussion and question and answer period that will allow us to cover anything that we might have missed. Again, working through Slido, and then we'll close in the middle of the day and move forward from there. So, moving on, as I've said over and over again, it's really important for everyone to engage. That's complicated with so many people in the room. But one great way to do this is through our social media and connections. You can hopefully have already downloaded the OceanObs app that you can download onto your phone or onto your computer. It's got the schedule, so you know where to go, when to go. You can look at the overall schedule, or you can make your own specialized schedule if you have particular events that you want to make sure that you get to. It can send you reminders. Make sure that you're sharing your thoughts, your feelings, your pictures through social media. And of course, we've got the Wi-Fi available that allows you to connect to all of these things. We've heard a bit about Slido, so if you've got your smartphones, pull them out. We're going to do a bit of practice. Eric commented yesterday how I think we've shown people yesterday how to enter questions, and that's really valuable. It's important to note that within each section, so we get a number of questions. You can vote on those and the highest questions will rise up to the top. And those are the ones that the session leaders brought up. But of course, the sessions only have a limited amount of time and a limited number of questions that they can address. Not to worry, all the questions are being archived and are being saved, and we're hoping to have those panel members or people that are involved in the particular sessions that you ask the question to go online and answer those questions. So don't feel that if you asked a question and then it disappears, that it's not important or not being addressed. It is going to be addressed just electronically. It's also important that if you want your question to be brought up in the plenary or in your session, that the sooner you get that question in, the more opportunity there is for others to see it and to vote on it and for it to rise up to the top. So don't be shy and wait to the last second to put in your question. But I think we've got that down pretty well. Although there are 1,500 of you here. We heard this morning there are only 300 people registered. I think we can get a few more. So please look through, and you've got instructions in your manual here. You can also ask some of the student volunteers. They'll help you set up Slido. We've got the instructions set up here. It's also very important that you not just sign in, but that you set up a profile, right? We want to know who you are. We want to know how we might be able to get back in touch with you. So please enter your name, your contact information so that we know who it is that's providing this feedback. We promise not to spam you or share your information with Google or other evil entities. Sorry. All right. I didn't say that. So yesterday you did your questions, but there are many more interesting capabilities through Slido. So today we're going to ask you to expand yourselves, and we're going to try a new thing. So another opportunity that we can do is to do a poll. This is something that's going to be very important over the next 3 days. So we're going to start this poll. So if you get out your phones or your computers, get into Slido, go into the Ocean Obs plenary room, and you should see this poll. And so we want you to start voting, and we want to see, what is your favorite ocean? That's not a choice. So I think this is a really powerful way to get a read on where the room is as we're starting to discuss various topics. Throughout the next 3 days, we can start to put up these polls and see where the room is on different issues, what we think are the most important. Again, this is an opportunity for you to provide feedback. So the more you're engaged, the more you're online and contributing your thoughts, the more that we can represent what's going on in this room. Again, it's the traditional ways of standing in the line and speaking to a microphone are very complicated and difficult when you've got so many people, and it's important to vote. So thank you all, and I hope that you will contribute to that. Okay, moving forward.
So this Slido thing is very important because, and together with the discussion you will have on the breakout session, because we need to build a Friday. Friday has not been yet built, so we need to come with the actions, the items we want to see in the next decade. So we have also started to draft a conference statement that will be finalized at the end of the conference. There is a draft. You see here the web address on the OceanOps website. And in the same page, you have two menus, one to visualize the statement and the other one to put comments on a Google Doc. And I encourage you to really read it and to get your comments out, because this is something that will be staying there forever, so as the OceanOps 19 conference statement, and we need you to make it really pushy, visible, and really exciting and understandable for the most. So, of course, we don't want to list all items that we are doing every day as our preferred science, but we want really to build an ocean integrated observing system that is fit for purpose for for our future and challenges. So please, I will not list the items that have been written over there, but really go on the website and submit your comments on there. Yes, it's me. So here we have a video from Prince Albert II. Prince Albert could not come, but he has a very good reason. So the special report on ocean and cryosphere from IPCC, it is now being discussed and will be finalized in Monaco. So he's hosting this IPCC 21st meeting. And so there is a video.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, I regret not to be among you today for this third edition of OceanOps. However, despite the distance between us, I was keen to let you know that I am one of you today. I'm one of you because I am currently preparing for the United Nations General Assembly taking place in a few days with its climate summit, which will be an important event for our oceans. I'm one of you because I'm about to host in Monaco the presentation of the IPCC's special report on the oceans and the cryosphere, a project I implemented with my foundation and launched 3 years ago. This report will give us a clearer view of the interactions between the oceans and the climate, the way global warming is altering the oceans, and the way the oceans help to mitigate global warming. It will help us shed more light on the situation of the oceans, better recognize their contribution faced with the challenge of global warming, and consequently protect them more effectively. Beyond these issues which concern me today, above all, I'm one of you because I'm very sensitive, not only to the matter bringing you together, but more importantly, to the approach that is a source of inspiration for you. It is indeed vital, in light of the complex issues we face, to take time to reflect, to take a detached view of things, to understand the long-term implications in order to identify solutions which must also be long-term. We are aware of some of these solutions, exploring currently unexplored ocean areas and improving knowledge of the biodiversity contained within, still largely obscure and yet already under threat. Implementing a law on the high seas that would supplement existing texts, in particular the Montego Bay Convention, which is now ill-adapted to current issues. Deploying efficient and coordinated marine protected areas provided with the sufficient resources all over the world. Combating pollution, especially plastic, which is destroying our seas, our ecosystems, and our health. Developing a blue economy able to exploit the infinite resources of the ocean intelligently and sustainably. All these issues call for a long-term approach which recognizes the need to act. All these issues unite us today, despite the distance. I therefore hope that your discussions will be fruitful, and I hope that we will have the opportunity to share them more directly in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, Prince Albert, for staying on time. Didn't have to pick up the paddle. So just to kind of wrap things up, again, we want to point out that it's important for your input and also to note that this is a process. The workshop is not a complete unit in itself. It is part of a process that's an ongoing process. So first we had the white papers that were prepared by each of you and the broader community that gave us the ideas on how we're going to form this workshop and the different themes that were important to the community. that was a very critical piece of this whole step. So we appreciate the time and effort that you all put into creating those white papers, and I hope that you've all taken the time to read through them and consider the statements, the points that they were trying to make. Those white papers then feed into this workshop. You'll notice that they're being integrated throughout the whole week as we address the different themes on each of the different days. And so the white papers kicked us off with the ideas. We now want to boil that down into some manageable action items that we hope to develop over the next few days, and then we move forward from there.
So I hope that you have read many of these white papers, but you have also your own recommendation. You have the synthesis of this white paper you can go through. And please really participate to all the conference events because we need your input. So every discussion is really important.
And then finally, it doesn't end with this workshop either. So from this, we will produce the conference statement, we'll produce a series of recommendations, but then we have to get to the job of implementing all of that. And so there are a number of steps that will be followed afterwards. I remember after Ocean Obs 09, there were a number of working groups that were formed, and that's when several programs were started up, and there's an ongoing effort to continue to develop and implement the ideas that come up here.
And finally, so this conference, we're really feeding actively on the UN Ocean Decade. So it's not something that is happening completely independently of us. We are really giving a very important input to such decade that will start really in a couple of years. So please, really take your role here.
So thank you very much for your attention. I hope you have a better appreciation for the structure and the organization of the workshop. We, again, encourage your participation and appreciate the time and effort that you've put into coming here today and throughout this week. Without further ado, we will move on to our plenary session and get this thing going.
So we call our two program committee colleagues, Mihan Dai and Monica Mulbert, that will take on from here. Thank you very much. You did a great job.
Official passing of the
paddle.
paddle.
Okay. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
All right. Good morning. Thanks, Sabrina and Chris, for the wonderful. I hope everybody now has a better understanding about the flow of the conference. We invite all the plenary speakers to sit on the stadium, please. Li Jin, Pierre. Aloha again. Come on. Good morning. I'm Mihan Dai. I'm from Xiamen University. I'm a chemical oceanographer by training. I'm very honored to be one of the 4 co-chairs of the program committee. And Monica and I will co-chair this session. And we're very pleased to have these 4 distinguished plenary to sit here. And we'll introduce them in a little bit. Before I move forward, I'd just like to acknowledge the planning team for the Information Day that include myself and Monica and Kim Juniper, Tony Lee, Ellen Mine, Anielska Benchika Mola, I hope I pronounced correctly, Fei Tai, Michelle Greco, Jay Newton, Kristen Uhlenbrock, Sun Yung Kim. So that's the whole team actually work out the whole plan for this Information Day. I let Monica to speak a little bit how we can handle this session. Monica, please.
Thank you.
Bom dia a todos. Obrigada pela presença. Welcome everybody. Aloha. There you go. Let's try again. Aloha. Okay. I did it.
That's fine.
Yeah, no, I'm not gonna. Anyway, we would like to welcome you all, but before we start today, we would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land, pay respect to the elders, both past and present, and extend our respect to other indigenous people present here. Having said that, you might have noticed that today is about information. And what do we really mean by information? The dictionary defines information as what is conveyed or represented by a particular arrangement or sequence of things. For ocean observing, the particular arrangement of things is determined by user needs. What is conveyed is the access to ocean observing systems through enhanced product delivery. So information also means understanding the information we don't have, finding gaps and analyzing the system to determine whether adequate channels exist to characterize both user and ocean observing science and technology requirements. Information also means finding definitions and defining what information and data are needed to better serve user communities. Ultimately, information guides the evolution of our observation system to create ocean-related user products that fill gaps in societal and scientific knowledge means. Today we're going to do a little change to what we've been doing in regards to the questions. We're going to be using Slido, and we'll try to have, after each speaker, the top question being asked by Slido, and then we'll come back to a question and answer period later on. Thank you.
Thank you, Monica. So we really want to thank all the community white paper sources who contribute, and we would like to provide a very short overview of the papers in the broad category of information. But before I get into these information papers, Spring has shown these slides, but I want to emphasize what the information message we can get from these the slides. And you clearly see the gaps in geographic coverage in terms of contribution of the white paper. And it's clear indicate all the observation system shortage and gaps, and in terms of capacity building as well. So we heard a lot of the keywords about gaps, and this is a clear gap we want to cover for the next 10 years in terms of geographic coverage. So our roadmap tried to identify the information needs. Its information needs require increased discussion of specific topics such as influence of global warming, fisheries, food security, indigenous, local traditional knowledge, participation, inclusivity, which accounts for diversity and inclusion of minority. And the Information Day session aims to highlight application of information at global, regional, and the national level. We try to identify gaps and difficulties, foster opportunities, and the integration of the efforts and contribute to the vision of the ocean observing opportunity in the coming decades. Presentation will highlight the overarching issues and point to the way forward, complementing community-wide papers, such as the plenary and the panels will follow this short summary. And we'll see there is, in addition to the geographic coverage gaps, and we also see clear gaps in addressing information needs in marine security, blue economy, observing system governance, data information, as well as observing technology and network. So this is kind of a network roadmap we're leading to. So this, in the broad category of the information, we have 37 white papers. And I listed here all these lead authors of these 37 white papers. And we have acknowledged additional 861 authors from 42 countries contributing these 37 white papers. And we also have to recognize 14 editors from 8 countries to contribute to this white paper get published. And also 73 reviewers from 18 countries. So it's really, Eric was talking about why community white paper is one of the legacy of the Ocean Ops conference series. This is really bottom-up, community-based effort and momentum. This is clearly reflected. Also, Chris was talking about this is a process actually leading to the next decade. Also, this clear indication or reflection of this effort. The key issues of these 37 white papers include technology, governance, data, evaluation of the data quality, emerging issues, for example, the role, research, and develop roadmap leading into low-cost, reliable sensors, for example, and a better funding agency to sustain all these information technology development. And also include the governance in terms of global coordination and open and sustainable data. And also in terms of data quality, we need a standardized best practice and etc. And in the lower panel shows how this 37 white paper is distributing. All right, I let Monica to continue this summary. Sure.
Okay, talking about gaps, it's an interesting point because gaps and recommendations that we're going to be talking about today, they are mainly a reflection of the community white papers submitted to the information session, and they're probably going to be the same recommendations and gaps in many other themes of this conference, because the whole idea is of integration and complementary information. The largest gaps that we have synthesized from the information papers are the need for cost-effective and reliable sensors to enhance current ocean observing systems. Data information needs to integrate historical ocean observation measurements in a way that it can be incorporated into current analysis. Particularly XBTs with technologies such as XBTs with emerging technologies and modernize historical data like I-codes for continuous long-term records that will help us understand global coverage and have a better sense and use for climate change, for instance. In order to sustain the ocean observing systems, enhanced and integrated governance and networking is very much needed. Information gaps are related to a range of sensitive, hot geographic areas and across disciplines, and also need to integrate science and societal themes, such as sources of uncertainty in prediction. This is particularly important for users such as the IPCC reports, because language and uncertainty are keys for their work. I mean, I should say our work, but for their work. And therefore, we need to understand, as scientists, we need to better communicate to these other bodies. The comment made earlier about the language, particularly to lay people, which are the ones that will convey the message to policymakers, is very important. So we need to look at ourselves and try to improve our communication skills in that sense. Recommendations, same thing as gaps. The striking and most significant were low-cost in situ sensors for biogeochemistry and ecosystem-related variables, better strategies for funding and engaging different sectors, global coordination and effective governance of an open and sustained data system, the need for best practices and assess and training of people throughout the globe, and mostly trying to minimize regional gaps in all aspects of observation and governance. I ask you to pay attention to the map we have just shown of community-wide papers, and think about GDP distribution across the globe. And then you tell me if it's a coincidence that we have the same distribution of GDP and contribution of community-wide papers. So maybe we should think about ways to minimize the gaps that are may be emerging from such a relationship. We also need to enhance data modeling and assimilation-based observing system in such a way that our efforts through closer collaborations between observers, modelers, and users are effective. We need to speak, again, a same language or have common goals. Better information needs should be assessed in emerging service sectors such as blue economy, maritime safety, and to better achieve the sustainable development goals that the UN has proposed for the decade of oceans. Other recommendations have to do with the intersection or the connection of governance and interoperability. And we ask you please to look at the community-wide paper synthesis online to have a better grasp of what we're saying. Anyway, we would like to invite you to have a look. This is what we're going to have next, our plenary speakers, and there will be the main session on realities and opportunities panel just after that, after our session here. And right now I'll leave Min Han to introduce our speakers. Thank you.
Thank you, Monica. So now let's move on to the plenary talks. We have 4 plenary talks. After each talk, we'll have each plenary talk to answer one top question from Slido. All right, I'm very honored to introduce the first plenary speaker, Dr. and Professor Li-Xing Wu. He's a member of the Chinese Academy of Science and the head of China's only national laboratory, Qingdao National Laboratory for Marine Science and Technology. And he also serves as the Vice President of Ocean University of China. He's one of the early pioneers in scientific committee of the NPOS program, stands for North Pacific Ocean Circulation and Climate and Experiment. Li Xin's research explores ocean circulation and climate change, and he leads the efforts of transprioritizing global ocean endorsed by the UN Decades of Ocean Science for Sustainability, for Sustainable Development, which has continuously expanded China's excellence and impact on establishing comprehensive observation network to deepening our understanding to the ocean and the better marine prediction. So without further ado, Li Xin, please. Let's give him first a round of applause. Right here.
Okay. Which one is?
It's forward, back, and it is the pointer.
Forward, right?
It is the pointer.
Okay.
The middle one, big one, yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Minghan. Aloha. Good morning, everybody. As we all realized, the first Ocean Ops meeting formulate the framework of the global ocean system. And the second workshop, add bio-component to the global observation. We have kept thinking what will be for the next 10 years of global observation. So in my 12 minutes talk, I try to convince the audience one of the major, the path or trend for the next 10 years of observation will be the massive submersal scale resolving interdisciplinary ocean observations. Doesn't work? Oh, big one, sorry. Well, this session is for information session. What future users need? We need to understand the ocean's role in Earth's climate. We need a healthy ocean. We need to promote blue economy. And also we need to protect our ocean. To cope with these challenges, we need to build a new generation of meso and submersal resolving interdisciplinary global ocean observations. Well, if you look at the image from the current satellite observation, the ocean is full of eddies, especially in the boundary current regions, where it has a significant influence of our lives. Well, you just simply calculated the mass transport by the ocean eddies. You end up a very surprising conclusion. The mass transport carried by the mass-scale eddy is comparable with the transport by the large-scale ocean circulation. It's very surprising. And also, the recent studies suggest even for the western boundary current, is highly regulated by the ocean-atmosphere interaction. This paper was published last year in Nature, okay? Well, we know that turbulent mixing is very important for the global ocean conveyor belt. And also it's very important to maintain the ocean stratification and also the material cycling. However, if you just look at the time series from the, Aloha here, you will find the eddy can significantly modulate turbulent vertical mixing, okay? And if you look at the biodiversity, right? The global pattern of the marine biodiversity actually is determined by the boundary current, where you have very strong mesoscale eddy and submesoscale eddy activities. Especially if you look at the lower panel of the ocean Texas, it's basically aligned with the western boundary current and the eastern boundary current, okay? So if you really want to understand what will be the change of the marine biodiversity, you have to tackle these meso and submeso eddies. Well, in 2012, we had a paper in Nature Climate Change talking about how the global warming will change the western boundary current. You can find global ocean warming hotspot over the major subtropical western boundary current region. That implies the global warming will intensify western boundary current. In that sense, in the future, the ocean Texas will be enhanced because of the western boundary current intensification. Okay? If you really understand what will happen for global marine biodiversities, you have to deal with the eddies. Okay? Well, look at the global pattern of the ocean carbon sequestration. The major carbon sink appear in the western boundary current region. Okay? We know over that area, you have eddies, you have fronts, you have filaments. How can you predict the future change of the ocean carbon storage or heat storage, right? We already saw yesterday the global warming or ocean warming is global warming. Where the ocean sucks heat? You have to think about this, right? When you look at the right panel, it's a paper published in Nature talking about how Gulf Stream changed gas hydrate over the continental shelf. Well, they find that recently the warming of the or acceleration of the Gulf Stream can destabilize gas hydrate over the continental shelf, right? So in that sense, if you think about the ocean resource, blue economy, you have to deal with this ocean nonlinear region, boundary current, eddies. Unfortunately, look at the current climate model. This is actually the model used for IPCC reports. There are huge bias in the boundary current region, Southern Ocean, tropical ocean. You look at the tropical ocean, the cold bias. We have been living with tropical cold bias for over several decades. We have to solve this problem if you really want to project what will change in the future. The Ocean Observation Committee have to do something to have the model to improve the model performance. I think there are a huge gap between the modeling community and the ocean ops community. You look at the eastern boundary, there are huge warming bias over that area. We know fishery, right? In the eastern boundary current region. How can you get rid of this warm bias? Ocean Observation Committee have to think about that. Well, if you look at the western boundary current region, you always have this kind of type of bias, right? Near the coast, warm bias. Off the coast, cold bias. How can we tackle this, model bias? Southern Ocean, huge warming bias for many years. The bias, the magnitude of the bias, even comparable with the seasonal change, the magnitude of seasonal change. How can you trust the projection in the Southern Ocean from current climate models, right? We know over that particular area, we have very strong mesoscale and submesoscale variabilities. Well, here clearly show if you have a coarse resolution and a high resolution model, what is the difference? You can immediately see the difference, right? Well, if you look at vertical heat transport, upwelling, right? This paper estimates the vertical heat transport from the submesosphere eddies. It's very surprised to see the vertical heat transport by the submesosphere eddy is even comparable with the surface heat flux. People don't believe it. Wow, this is too strong. But at least it suggests the submersible processes does play a very important role to maintain the ocean fronts in the boundary current region, which affect storm tracks, affect carbon sequestration, affect fishery, because we know in the western boundary current extended region, usually there are big fishery over there. Well, look at our valley. Well, we have a consortium model, we have a hybrid model. If you look at the upper valley, if no eddy, the vertical upper valley may be 2 orders weaker, then the model have some mass scales. How can you live with a cost restored model without submass scale? Because if you think about biochemical cycle, you think about the fishery, you think about the mixing, too weak. The mesoscale and the submesoscale feel the vertical mixing, feel the material cycles, right? Here's the hope. My friend Gokhan, the chief scientist of CSM, is in this room. I took the slide from him. For if you look at high resolution community Earth system model from NCAR, there is a hope. Well, if you, using this model, increase the ocean resolution to permit submersible scale, you can see a significant change in the boundary current regions, which you have a strong heat transport, you have a strong freshwater transport, you have a strong biochemical flux over there. But if you look at carefully in the tropics and the eastern boundary current region, the improvement is not that significant. So there may be involved the ocean eddy atmosphere interaction in the model. Look at ENSO. For the causal model, you have a strong ENSO and a different frequency. If you go hybrid model, the amplitude looks good. The periodicity looks better. This is really, really important in the changing climate. Look at the current result from the IPC model. My friend Wen Jucai is in the room. He has done a lot of work, checked how greenhouse warming affect extreme climate. The conclusion drawn from his work tells us in the warm climate, the extreme El Nino, extreme IOD will be enhanced. And also, the pan-tropic interaction. We know that ENSO can affect the tropic Atlantic, ENSO can affect the Indian Ocean dipole. And we also know that tropic Atlantic and the tropic Indian Ocean can affect El Nino. However, in warm climate, the tropics will be eventually decoupled. The interaction between tropic basins will be weakened. So my time is almost there. Okay, but even for hybrid model, life is not perfect. The tropic is getting better. But if you go western boundary current region, you end up strong eddy, strong submersible processes. We have to, again, to take care of this issue. Where is the hope from ocean observations? Because there is a gap of the knowledge about these small scales. Okay? Again, I would like to highlight the future observation, the critical regions, we have to implement our observations. We have a bias in the western boundary current region. We have a bias in the eastern boundary. We have a bias in the tropics. We have a huge bias in the Southern Ocean. The ocean observation community have to help modeling community to improve the model performance, to improve the prediction skills, to build certainty or confidence for the future. Well, of course, the meso scale and the sub-meso scales is very, very difficult to tackle. So we call new technologies. Satellite, can we do that? We need innovations. Marine robotics, moorings, sensors, because we enter a new stage to take care of the mesoscale and the sub-mesoscale process. We call for big data, artificial intelligence, and supercomputing, ABC. AI, big data, and the computing powers to help us to take care of these issues. And also, marine information network. Here's an example of what the QLM has done in the Western Pacific, South China Sea, and the Indian Ocean. We call it 2 ocean, 1 sea. You can see in this particular area, we already deploy over 100 moorings to resolve the fine scale of these regions. We develop a new technology for the mooring. Almost 20% of the mooring in this area has been realized full-time data transmission. If you are interested in the data, you just go to our QLM webpage, you will find the data. Okay? In the next 5 years, under the umbrella of the Transparent Ocean Initiative, we try to realize the whole mooring array real time. Here's the summary. I think the take-home message from my talk is for the next 10 years, we really need new technologies to tackle the mesoscale and the sub-scale ocean process, which has a huge influence for the future users. Thank you very much. Question?
Yeah, it's on. You just have to. No, it's open. Just say whatever you want.
Okay. As I said, we'll pick up one relevant question from a Slido to this talk. What we are seeing here, probably this one. What is about meso and the sub-meso scale that makes this top priority for user? Which user? Can you try to answer this?
Yes.
question? Yeah.
The first user is a modeler. Well, you want to predict the future. How can you do? Ocean and climate models. Because of the advantage of supercomputers, we push our model to resolve some scales. Nobody knows it is correct or not, right? We need data from observational community to validate the model, to improve the prediction scale of the model. And then we need data to understand what caused the model bias. I think that's a huge lead in the future. This is the first thing. The second thing, if you're talking about the carbon storage, heat storage, you want to predict the climate extreme, weather extreme, if you need to know the change of the boundary currents, which has a huge impact on the coastal biodiversity, the coastal fishery, and the coastal environment, right? You need that.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Li Xin. Yeah, let's give him another round of applause. All right, I'm very pleased to invite the next plenary speaker, Pierre-Yves Letron. I hope I pronounced correctly. Is a physical oceanographer, the scientific director of Makeda Ocean International Research Director at IFAMER, France. His research interests include in situ and satellite ocean observing system and operational oceanography. Dr. Tron is a member of GOOSE, Geo Blue Planet, and the European Ocean GOOSE Steering Committee. He also chairs the Council of European Research Infrastructure, EuroArgo, and is a member of the International Argo Steering Committee. Let's welcome Pierre-Yves. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm very pleased to report here on a major achievement made by marine services over the past decade and discuss also the future challenges, to better meet future user needs. So I will cover in this short presentation first remind you the drivers for marine services on the state of play, and we'll then go explain rapidly the value chain, so how we move from observation to end user on the specific role of marine services. And I will discuss the importance of the observing system for marine services. I will then give you an overview of the existing capabilities for marine service as of today, and taking more here a European perspective with the Copernicus Marine Service. And the last part of my presentation will be more on the discussion on future needs, how we meet them, this user pull and science push issues. And I will conclude with some perspective with the possible evolution of marine service in the next decade. Okay, just drivers, so very briefly, as you know all, so the ocean are a major source of food, energy, strong contributor to the global economy, but they face strong pressure. So there is really this increasing and pressing needs to monitor the ocean, to better manage the oceans and their resources. And this led in the past to the development of marine services that address the needs first of the blue economy, but also environmental policy, and are required to ensure a safe and healthy ocean. So there have been a major achievement of 20 years of achievement since Saint Raphael on the early stage of the GODAE, the Global Ocean Data Assimilation Experiment. So we now have much better global ocean observing system. Our modeling and data assimilation capabilities developed very well, both for physics, sea ice, and more recently for biogeochemistry. So there are capability for real-time ocean forecast and analysis, product quality assessment, operational services, user interaction, and user engagement. And in addition to that, we develop also international cooperation between these different elements for the observation, modeling, data assimilation, and end user engagement. Okay, so the characteristics of marine services that they address a wide range of user and application ranging from the coastal and marine environment, marine resources, weather, climate, maritime transport, marine safety, and I will give a few examples later on. But a key aspect for this presentation is really to explain where they sit on the specific role of marine service in the value chain, which is a complex one that goes from observation to information on user. And they really play a very special role. They are in between the observation from satellite, from in situ, and the associated data management structure, and on the other side of this loop, the user and application and societal benefits. Within marine services, it's important also to consider the two types of marine services. So what is called the core generic marine services that are really gathering capabilities for monitoring from observation, modeling, data assimilation on services. And then on the downstream side, more customized solutions, really directly targeted to a specific application that rely on core services to really provide solution to end user. So in this value chain and for marine service, the role of observing system is essential. So all the marine services that exist today are highly dependent on the observing capabilities. The marine services are using the same backbone system as for climate, but of course they have specific requirements in terms of real-time capability and high resolution. And the specific role of marine service with respect to the observing system is really to develop work with the observing community on requirement, impact, design, and also advocacy, which is also key for the long-term sustainability of the system. So given the development, the major advance we had over the past decade in observation, modeling, data assimilation, and services, we now have global marine service capability in the different countries. I will here focus on what exists today in Europe as part of the Copernicus Marine Service. The Copernicus Marine Service has been operational for the last 5 years, and it provides an operational monitoring and forecasting of the ocean from the global scale to the European scales. It's covering both observation, a high-level product from observation, and modeling and data assimilation, and covering the physics, biogeochemistry, on sea ice. And the description that is provided on an operational basis include reprocess data on reanalysis, real-time description on forecast. This is what we call a core service, and the target of the Copernicus Marine Service is the intermediate downstream service provider. In terms of, so today we have more than 100 of producers cooperating in Europe to feed almost 20,000 intermediate users worldwide. They are covering a wide range of markets and also they support environmental and climate policies. I mean, from polar monitoring, water quality, coastal monitoring, marine renewable energy, marine safety, and so on. So those systems are based on a new capability, and so we now have a new global capability for global ocean forecasting. This is here just a forecast of the surface current for today that was issued last week by the Mercator Ocean Global 112-degree model. This system assimilates in real time all altimeter data, sea surface temperature, and all in-situ data that are available to provide this capability. And there are other, of course, capabilities such as this one in the international landscape. Important to note that these systems have been continuously improved thanks to the improvement made in the observing system, but also in the modeling data assimilation. Just here, one illustration on the evolution of the forecast skill of this model over time, on the major improvement we had 2 or 3 years ago when we added new satellite data in the system, in particular here the Sentinel-3 altimeter from the Copernicus program, together with new data assimilation methods. Okay, thanks to the capability, so we can now much better serve users, and we starting from physics, which is today can be considered as very fully mature. I mean, with both from the global, regional, and coastal scale. And here, one example in Spain for the where they use operational forecasting from the large scale up to the coastal and fine scale of the ports to really inform the port management in an operational way. And this is relying on a suite of models and downscaling up to a few hundreds of meter resolution. But it's not only physics. So there was also important advance over the past couple of years to develop marine services system also for biogeochemistry. Of course, they are not yet at the level of maturity of physical system, and they are already also very much dependent on the observing capabilities. But this is here an example of a system which is run by the Met Office in the European Northwest Shelf. This is a reanalysis that assimilates surface ocean color observation in the model more. On this really enables new societally relevant products. So in that case, it's monitoring the bottom oxygen condition for different years and regions, which is also an essential aspect for ocean health monitoring. There are also, this is more here at the prototype level, but very interesting development. Again, an example here in Europe, but similar one exists in different places on this monitoring and forecasting for the higher trophic levels. So it's really going here up to the fish on microplankton, on zooplankton, and so on. So there are already integrated monitoring systems that are developed, that are not tested, and they can provide very new advice, new capability for fishery management, but also for marine ecology, because those systems are used also to define marine habitats and can be used for marine biodiversity protection. Okay, looking at the way ahead, how can these marine services evolve to better meet future user needs? And we are here both on this user pool and science and technology push. First, it's very key to remind that users are really, those are user-driven systems, so users need to be explicitly and transparently involved in the evolution of the services, so that drives the evolution. You need to gather that feedbacks and to monitor them. A key aspect is to translate user requirement into achievable service evolution objectives. Of course, scientific and technological advances are to be fully taken into account. I will come back to them in the next slide. And some innovation capacity is required. Again, going back to the value chain I presented at the start of the presentation, it's really extremely important that we cover the service evolution covers the full value chain, which go from observation, core generic services, downstream specialized services and user. You cannot jump directly from user requirement to an observation system evolution. So in terms of user pool, the important activity is really to identify, understand ocean information needs from the different market sectors. So I identify a few of them here, and then develop, showcase, offer data usage, and many ways to interact regularly with users. This is the only means to gather their needs, their feedbacks, and you need also to have set up advisory committee, advisory board, and so on. On the user need, most often they require a lot of information from past, present, future, often very high resolution, but the reliability, availability, operational service are key characteristics on their needs. In terms of science and technology push, I mean, this is some teams of innovation and research that are needed to maintain system at the state of the art and response to future user needs. And they cover modeling, assimilation, observation, and so on. For instance, there are many issues on coastal ocean, on the way we couple the coastal ocean with the land and hydrology, improve modeling for biogeochemistry, high trophic level, coupling, ensemble data assimilation, cloud, big data, artificial intelligence, and a lot as well on the new generation of ocean model and HPC infrastructure. So just to conclude, I mean, some element for how the marine service could evolve in the next decade. So we expect a much broader user uptake thanks to improve user engagement, but also improve offer on services. So towards more integrated system, I mean, for including the different components of the planet, so ocean, wave, ice, atmosphere, hydrology, physics, and biogeochemistry. One key aspect is really to move biogeochemistry and biology at the level of maturity that we have today for physics. The seamless transition from open to coastal, a lot on higher resolution, which was also addressed by the previous presentation, probabilistic forecast, extending range forecast, and so on. I mean, the main point, all these evolutions are, of course, major ones. That is usually a 10-year perspective for the evolution of marine services, but they also will require major evolution on the global to coastal ocean observing system. This requires a co-development between the two. So conclusion. So the main message here, so we have a complex value chain from observation to user, and marine services play a central role in between observation and user, and within marine service, modeling and data assimilation play a key role. There have been major achievements in the development of marine service over the past decade, and those are strongly linked to the development of the global ocean observing system. So if we want to meet future user need, but also to meet future challenges for ocean monitoring, we really need to have a co-design, co-development between marine service, observing systems, and with a broader user engagement. And this is very likely a new paradigm that this community should embrace, for the next decade. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Again, we'll pick up one top question related to marine services to Pierre-Yves. So this is the top one. So what marine services provide to policy-making end users rather than commercial customers? Can you address that?
It's a complex question, but so marine services as per our core services, so what we provide different type of products targeting both this downstream service, the commercial user, but also for policy. But policy, you need one additional step. This is the reason why, for instance, that within the Copernicus Marine Service, we developed the so-called Ocean State Report, some general information that really trying to gather the information that is collected through satellite in-situ observation on model to inform policies on the evolution of the ocean and the ocean health.
All right, thank you very much. Again, Pierre-Yves.
Well, it's my pleasure to introduce you Anna Sequeira. Anna is an ARC DECRA Research Fellow at the University of Western Australia. And she's been supported by the Australian Institute of Marine Sciences. She's the leader of the Marine Megafauna Movement Analytical Program and has been involved in many very cool analysis of big data sets. So without further delay, I'll give you Anna Sequeira. Please welcome her.
Thanks for the introduction, Monica, and hello everyone. This is my first Ocean Ops, so I'm really excited to be here today and get to discuss how we might potentially meet these future user needs. The perspective I bring is a little bit different, so it's from the perspective of marine megafauna, so the large animals in the ocean that perform very long migrations, for example, turtles, seals, sharks, whales, and so on. These animals use the oceans in a very different way, and they cross many different boundaries, jurisdictional boundaries. They travel very, very large areas. And while they go about their migrations, they actually encounter many different threats. So there's an example here of 4 of those different threats for which we actually have enough information at this global scale. And really these different ones, so including shipping intensity, fishing effort, global warming or climate, water temperature warming, and plastic density are already impacting populations at very different spatial and temporal scales. We really don't know the extent of the impacts, but we certainly know that the impacts are very varied, and they can include things like changes in their space usage or just disorientation, and this might be associated with industrial developments. It can be blunt trauma, laceration, or amputation, for example, due to ship strikes, entanglement, ingestion or suffocation of pollution items, including plastic or ghost fishing nets, and also starvation. If they're losing their habitat and possible ways to hunt, they're starving. And so, of course, the combination of all of these also lead to death, as well as direct extractive activities, for example, fishing and bycatch. So it's very important for us to understand the extent of these impacts for many reasons, and one of them is because marine megafauna have a key role in keeping balance in the marine ecosystems, and so they are really the key players to keep ocean health. But not only because they're not very, it's not just good to keep them because of their roles, but also they actually, in a more selfish way, I guess, they are actually can act as ocean observers for us. So they can act as autonomous sampling platforms to actually collect both physical environmental variables and biological variables, so linking into the EOVs and EBVs that a lot of what's happening during this conference is about. And because they travel so far in the oceans and cover so many different areas, they can actually become a more efficient way to extend and increase the spatial extent of the coverage, both in space and time. I understand that it's hard for you to read what's written in that figure there, but the idea is really to capture the different types of variables that these animals can collect for us. And this was published in one of the community white papers that came out of the OceanObs 19 conference. And these variables include things like conductivity, temperature, salinity, dissolved oxygen, and so on, that are already classed as essential ocean variables. So while these animals go about their migration, of course, we also can collect their tracks. And tracking data has another very important function. In a recent publication earlier this year, we showed the value of many different studies from around the world, including many different species, the power of the tracking sets collected to actually be used to inform conservation management. In that publication, we also highlighted the fact that from tracking data, from collecting tracking data, all the way to management actions, it's a very long and winded road, and you can see on the top scheme there. So it's not immediate, and this really just highlights a little bit more urgency for us to try and collect this data in a more efficient way so that we can actually accelerate the process that leads to this conservation. So the translation of tracking data into conservation policy and management is an important part of the process that we also need to have into account after all the interoperability and all the efficiency of data sets are collected. We looked in this paper at the questions that are mostly frequently used to address conservation issues and management, and there's a range of them. So they include, for example, definition of boundaries for protected areas, look at quantifying demographic parameters, so this includes mortality rates, for example, reducing bycatch, and so on. Of course, for us to be able to answer a range of different questions, they are all very dependent on the sample size that we have. So how many animals do we actually track to be able to answer questions that are relevant for conservation management? And so in another publication also from earlier this year, we had a look at the papers that used tracking data and answered specific questions. And so this slide pretty much summarizes the results. So you can see at the top there that when we have small sample sizes, so sample sizes below 10, say, or even sample sizes equal to 1, this corresponds to a phase of discovery of the studies or innovation studies. So sample sizes this small are actually very, very important because they are the ones that allow us to test new technologies, for example, or to show proof of concept of another method that has never been used before, or even provide the way to track one species that has never been tracked before, or a size of an age stage of that life stage of that species that has never been tracked before. So extraordinarily valuable sample sizes. But to start answering questions that are relevant for management, we really need to be more in a consolidation phase. So in this phase, we have a lot more animals that have been tagged of the species of interest, and that's when we can start asking questions about space use and so on. To talk about questions that happen at that very large spatial scale that I mentioned at the beginning of my presentation, we really need to be in what we call the synthesis phase of projects. So we need to have hundreds of animals tracked to actually be able to answer these questions, and probably for some of them even looking into the thousands. So especially if we want to look at susceptibility to anthropogenic activities or comparisons between what species, different species do in the ocean. This is the area that I'm particularly interested in and where I've spent a bit of time recently doing some work. And so I'm going to just share with you very, very briefly 2 examples of the work I've been doing in this space. So the first one is one of the main outputs from MAP. It was a paper published last year in Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. And by bringing together many members from the community, we were able to collate over 2,500 tracks of about 50 species from a range of taxa, including polar bears, seals, turtles, sharks, and so on. And the map that you're seeing on the screen is actually the largest global data set that includes multiple species at this global scale. The main outcome of that work was that we found a convergence of movement patterns across all species that was not actually expected. We expected to see relationships between species that are more closely related to each other to show more similar movement patterns. But what we found is that those movement patterns or the differences were more due to the habitat through which the species were moving. So say, for example, if we were in open ocean, all the species, independently if they were a penguin or a turtle or a shark, they move in a much more directed way, so it's like they know where they're going, they set their path, and they just go wherever they want to go. If we're talking about coastal environments, the movement patterns are a lot more complex. This provides some hope that the animals are able to adapt in some ways to all the changes that are happening, but of course now we need to know how fast they can actually adapt. And so, like I said, this was a very large collaborative effort. The paper includes 58 co-authors from 40 institutions across the world, across 11 nations. I've listed the names of the authors all in here because it is really a global, a collaborative effort, and it's important to acknowledge participants. So still in this spirit of large collaborations, I move on to the second example, and this is the Global Shark Movement Project led by David Sims and Nuno Queiroz. I'm part of the steering committee of that project. This project focused specifically on sharks, and again, it was a very large collaborative effort. We have over 150 co-authors in this paper that was published in Nature about a couple of months ago, I think. And for this study, we collated tracking data from 23 species of sharks, and the main objective was to look at overlaps between areas that are very important for sharks, the areas that they use, and overlap between that and fishing activities, so including long lines, which is a big threat for some of the sharks. So long story short, the main summary of this study was that the overlap is very high, and actually there's not that much space left in the ocean for these sharks to go about their daily lives without being worried or feeling this presence threat of fishing and long lines. So it's this paper that came out recently really shows that the community is starting to look at these spatial scales and realizing the importance of bringing the community together to do work at these very large spatial scales. But like I said at the beginning, there's many threats happening, and I showed an example of 4. This particular one focused only on fishing, but we really need to be thinking about all the other threats in the environment as well. And so this slide here just summarizes how all those threats sort of come together. And the map in the center shows multiple threats. So the colors there just shows where multiple threats are occurring at the same locations, where the warmer colors really indicating multiple threats that also have higher risk for most of the marine megafauna that occur in those areas, and lighter colors and light blue is more lower number of threats and lower risk as well. I have a poster on particularly this, so feel free to come and catch me if you want to talk a little bit more about the details of this. But I wanted to highlight 2 points here. One point is that, of course, for us to understand where these animals go, we need all the environmental variables, but maybe it's also time to start thinking about essential human variables that we should bring into the ocean observing system, especially in this context of blue economy and where things are moving in terms of industrialization in the sea and all those developments. So I just wanted to make that point at this stage. And the second point is, if we really want to understand what are the impacts for these key species, marine megafauna, that really regulate ocean health, we also need to have a database and a data set that allows us to study them at this very large range. So I'm pleased to say that I've been in contact with many researchers from around the world, and in addition to the maps that you've already seen, together we have assembled a data set that is now well over 10,000 individual tracks. This is just a sample of the tracks. Of course, this is only possible with very large collaborative efforts, so it's in the hundreds of collaborators. Last time I counted, we were over 300. But as you can see, the data is messy. So this is the raw data that I'm showing you here today. So it's the data as I receive it. So it's messy. Not only it's messy, but it's probably not complete. A lot of the data sets that are received are not complete. And the format, the data types, and the formatting of the data that I received is just really, really disparate. So, of course, for us to be able to do this and to do this in an efficient way, I think one of the tasks, from my perspective, one of the tasks for the coming decade is really to start looking at ways to do this efficiently, collect data in similar ways so that we can actually bring it together and look into that concept of interoperability that was discussed all yesterday. So to kickstart this, actually just before this conference, just this past weekend, I organized a workshop to kickstart a global initiative to coordinate and integrate marine megafauna tracking data into the ocean observing systems. So we brought together almost 30 people from different organizations that are associated with different national and regional tagging networks. And together we share this vision that the continued presence of marine megafauna and the role in the ecosystems needs to stay for future generations. So it's all about this legacy that we need to let for the future generations. And to action this vision, we have the mission to deliver coordinated, sustained observations of marine animals and their environment at scales that meets the needs for governments and also for citizens as well. So we have an initial steering committee that was formed, and now the next steps are to include new members and, of course, start coordinating with existing panels and also with existing groups that are already working towards standardization to make sure that the standardization occurs all across the board. And the next steps would be to, of course, continue to expand the extensive work that already started at OceanObs 09 to integrate tracking data into the GOOS system, and also, of course, start delivering those essential variables, so whether more from the biology side or from the oceanography side, and fit into the respective panels. This also made us think about a question that came out in one of the panels yesterday. So what would we be proud of to have measured in the past 10 years, in 10 years from now? So what would be proud to measure. And from my perspective, I think if we really bring together all the things that are already being measured and what was just spoken in the previous presentation, so all those physical oceanography variables, link them together with biology all the way to marine megafauna to really assess the ocean health, and do this in an efficient and interoperable way, I think that would be something really to be proud of, especially if it leads to making conservation efforts more efficient. So from my perspective, that would definitely be something worth considering and doing. So that's it from me today. Thank you very much. I'll leave you with a list of some of the publications that we have been doing in this space, looking at this global scale. Yeah, and I'm happy to take a question.
Apparently the top question is, are animal-borne observations already combined with data streams from more established OceanObs platforms, Argo floats, gliders?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and I'm probably not the best person to answer it. You'll see the next speaker might be the best person to answer it, but there's a lot of work that has been done into including the data that is collected by animals in the sea, so there's a lot of developments being done, and really the idea is to make sure that the animals as autonomous sampling platforms is seen as part of the platforms that collect the essential ocean variables. So there's a lot of work done in that sense. In terms of the integration, I think there's still a little bit to do, but we're very close, so there's perspectives on accuracy and comparability with the data that is already being collected normally by the Argo floats, etc. But I think we're getting really close, and definitely the data that is collected would be very useful, and it's been used especially in polar systems where it's very hard to get the Argo floats to work or to get ships to reach. So there's definitely a lot of data already being collected, but I think the next speaker might be a better person to answer that in more detail.
Thank you.
Okay, so my pleasure to introduce Mark Hindle from University of Tasmania. Mark has been, his research interests are, among many others, the biology of marine mammals and seabirds, but Mark's presence here is our liaison from high latitudes and Southern Ocean organisms. Mark has played a big role as a liaison between the scientific community and SCAR and Kamala over the past few years. And will talk to us about some of that work now. So Mark, please. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. Yesterday morning, John Gunn told us that in OceanObs 09, they had a special session on biology and ocean observations. It was in a small room and they failed to fill it. And now, 10 years later, there's all of you come to listen to talks about biology and ocean observations. So it's a fantastic amount of progress in just 10 years. I'm going to focus more on the Southern Ocean, and particularly on the Southern Ocean. I have to work out how to work this. Monica, how does this work? The middle one?
This one here.
This one?
Yeah.
There's 4 buttons to choose from. Okay, so in the Southern Ocean, into the future, the need for information is not going to go away. Even though the Southern Ocean is a remote place, it's still exposed to many of the same threats that we've heard about quite often already in this conference so far. And I'm going to talk to you about 2 of those potential end users and the sort of information that they might need into the future. The first are marine managers. So in the Southern Ocean, there's an increasing fishery. Now, we're lucky in the Southern Ocean that we have a group called the Commission for the Conservation of Marine Antarctic Living Resources, CAMLR. They are a very effective group at managing marine resources in the Southern Ocean. They set catch limits and so forth. But one of their emerging and most useful tools is spatial management, effectively the use of marine protected areas. In order to set up marine protected areas, CAMLR need information on which parts of the Southern Ocean are particularly important. What do they need to focus on in terms of protection? The figure here just shows the sort of information that they need. This is a bioregionalisation. It's an attempt to categorise the different parts of the Southern Ocean, in this case using physical data. What they really need, though, is to be able to identify bits of the Southern Ocean which are important biologically, and I'll come back to that in a minute. The second major group of people that are going to be using data in the Southern Ocean into the future are climate scientists. We all know the importance of the Southern Ocean, not just from its own perspective, but in its role in the global climate. So we're going to need more and better physical observations from the Southern Ocean in order to move forward in understanding what's happening in the world's climates. Now, many aspects of the information that we need for both of those things are largely unobservable in the Southern Ocean, or at least very difficult to observe. The fact that it's remote doesn't help. The fact that it's covered in ice for much of the year is another major problem. But, and Anna made this point very well in her talk, we can use biotelemetry and animal tracking data to help us observe some of those otherwise unobservable features. And so I'm going to talk now about both the spatial management and the climate science and how we can use animal data to try and help us answer those questions. So in terms of spatial management in the Southern Ocean, as I said, CAMLR uses marine protected areas increasingly as a way to protect the area. But a key challenge for any ecosystem is knowing what areas warrant particular attention. Now, you could go and ask 10 different biologists which species you might think warrant particular attention, and of course you'll get 10 different answers. Everybody will talk about their favourite one. So which species, or how do you determine these important areas? Well, a powerful approach is to assess in space and in time areas of ecological importance, and we can define those as areas that are used by multiple species of top predators. And by bringing together many data sets from different species, what you end up with is something that's much more than just the sum of the parts. Because if you have an area that's used not only by many different predator species, but species which are krill feeders and fish feeders and think of another word, let's just stick with fish and krill. If you get multiple guilds of animals feeding in the same place at the same time, it tells you that that area has a great diversity and abundance of the lower trophic levels. So the top predators can tell us about the ecological importance of regions. And that's where animal tracking data can come in. They can help us identify these areas of ecological significance. And that's what we've done in the Southern Ocean. So in the Southern Ocean, we set up under the auspices of SCAR, we set up a study called the Retrospective Analysis of Antarctic Tracking Data. We did this because we really wanted to use tracking data to establish these areas of ecological significance. But we also knew that it would be completely impractical and too expensive to set up a study to specifically do that. And why would we need to when people have been tracking animals in the Southern Ocean already for 20 years or more? So the idea of this study was to get the tracking community together to provide all of their data into one big synthesis. And what you can see on the screen here is just an animation of all the tracking data that we were able to compile from our colleagues in the Southern Ocean. There were over 40 data contributors, more than 16 species, and well over 2 million location estimates. And this is an animation done by Louise Huckstad at University of Santa Cruz, and it's a really nice illustration of this great depth of data that we got and a great spatial coverage that we got as well. However, as wonderful as that data set is, and I should also say that one of the nice things about doing this work was being instrumental in bringing the biological community together. I think it's a wonderful sign of how mature the tracking community is, that they were willing to contribute their data in this way. And I think it's particularly telling that every one of those contributors was more than happy for their data to be made publicly available. So the RATA data set is publicly available. Anybody can download it and access it. And I think that's a really wonderful sign about how well our community works together. Okay, so one of the problems, though, is that even though we had lots of data, it wasn't completely representative of the whole Southern Ocean. We couldn't track every animal from every colony for every species. So in order to move forward, we needed to rely on physical data. We needed to go to the physical oceanography community and use physical data to help us develop models which would fill in the gaps. So we used physical data, as you can see on the screen there, to develop habitat distribution models, so we were able to predict across the whole Southern Ocean where animals would be. That resulted in these sorts of maps. These are species or habitat important maps for each of our species in the Southern Ocean. I won't go to them in any detail, but the point is that they're global maps. They represent a full coverage of the Southern Ocean, and that was only possible because we could develop habitat models based on physical data. Okay, so we would go from our raw data, we would develop the individual species importance maps, and then this figure here shows them all combined into one. So this is where we're getting our first look at these areas of ecological significance. These are areas where multiple species that are important to multiple species. And this figure here just shows the final assessment of the most ecologically important areas in the Southern Ocean. So the blue areas on that map are the areas that are used by many species across many different types of feeding guilds. And it's exactly these data that are needed by the spatial managers to define where they're going to put spatial marine protected areas. I was just at a meeting in South Africa where we were talking about subantarctic marine protected areas, and it was these data that really form the basis of a lot of the definitions of where we should be looking to protect the Southern Ocean. Okay. Let's talk about the second major end user, that's climate scientists. In the Southern Ocean, it's well recognised that collecting oceanographic data is challenging. Argo floats have done a wonderful job in providing data globally, but in the Southern Ocean, it's particularly challenging because of the presence of ice and all those environmental factors that are problematic. So some years ago, a consortium of biologists going under the consortium of MEOP, Marine Mammals Exploring the Oceans Pole to Pole, began to deploy high-resolution CTD tags on seals to collect data. And the figure you can see here is from one of the very first deployments we ever did. This is a bunch of elephant seals that were instrumented at Kerguelen, and then they all obligingly swam south to the Antarctic continental shelf, collecting CTD profiles as they went. And we've built on that program now over 15 years, and we've collected CTD data from elephant seals and elsewhere in the world, as you'll see, in places that we would otherwise have real trouble getting CTD data. Many of you will have seen this figure already. All it really shows is the number of CTD profiles delivered latitudinally across the globe. And the really important message to take home there is that the blue line, which represents the seal-derived oceanographic data, really dominate at the poles, particularly in the Southern Ocean. And that's because our seals can go places that Argo floats can't. And after, as I said, 15 years of data, we now have an enormous data set from the Southern Ocean. The figure here just shows the density of CTD profiles that have been collected in the Southern Ocean over that time. It's probably a little hard to see from that figure. The Argo community were very rightly celebrating their 2 millionth profile yesterday. Now, in the animal tracking world, we haven't got anywhere near that, but we do have 600,000 profiles in the MEOP database. Okay, this is just a snapshot. This is just last year. This is the deployments that we did last year in the Southern Ocean. So it's a single year, one out of our 15 years. And each one of these little lines is a seal which has gone out into the ocean and collected data for us. Now, you may not be able to see it, but your eye is probably being drawn to that big cluster of points coming out of Kerguelen, but there are a number of other little spots around the Southern Ocean where we had trackers on Weddell seals, and we're collecting data from the coastal environment. Now, I guess it's important to stress that we're not saying that these seal data are the same as Argo data. They're clearly not. We're not pretending they're Argo data. There's a number of things that are different about them. You know, the seals tend to not go as deep as Argo go. Many, many differences. But I think it's irrefutable that the data that are provided by the seals is an incredibly valuable supplement to the data that we provide from other sources. Because we've been doing this work for so long, and in fact I feel a little bit like I'm preaching to the converted here, I suspect most folks are fully on board with the important role that seals can contribute to oceanographic data. There have been a number of publications using seal data already, and that number is growing all the time. And in fact, there's been a lot of talk about it at this meeting, and there's another meeting in Hobart in November, which is being done to move forward and get animal sensor work recognised as an emerging observation network in the OCG. And I think that's a really important milestone, not just for the animal tracking community, but for goose overall, to be able to get these data available to the broader community and to answer the question that was after Anna's talk, a really important step in making sure these data get integrated into all the other existing databases. So we were asked to provide a couple of challenges to the audience. I think that we can safely say that biotelemetry can indeed help us observe the unobservable, particularly in the Southern Ocean, but globally, and they can help us address a lot of the future information needs that will be emerging over the next decade or so. Anna really covered off on this point, but it never hurts to hear it twice. We have a number of large coordinated international tracking efforts that already exist, and they will continue to inform conservation planning. But really what's needed is a framework to bring all those together, and Goose, I think, offers a really excellent opportunity for us to develop that framework as an observing system within Goose. I think I've made the point that biophysical collaborations are very rich. It's not just that we have biological observations, that we have oceanographic observations. When those two come together, there's great richness in what we can learn. So my final challenge, and it shouldn't be too arduous, is that if you're a physical oceanographer, find an animal tracking person, buy them a beer, because they typically like beer, and have a chat, because I think that opening those sort of communication channels is really going to help us move things forward. So thank you.
the use and need for standardized data has been addressed, but how has not? Yes, through standardizing, but where are the next steps and who's involved?
Excellent. That's an excellent question. And I think Anna and I both spoke about that to some extent. I think what needs to happen is that we do need to become a more coordinated group. And in terms of the oceanographic data provided by seals and other animals, I think that's well in hand. So as I mentioned, we do have this move to get ocean-borne sensors recognised as an emerging network under the OCG. And with that will come the standardisation of those data, and we're already talking about how we should do that, and we're already talking with people from the Argo community so we can learn from what they've done. With respect to the animal tracking, that's kind of a more broad church and a little bit more difficult to achieve, I suspect, but we just had a 2-day workshop where we spoke specifically about standardising those sorts of data. So I think I'm really optimistic that from this meeting there will be a really positive move and a push to make sure that we can actually achieve those things.
Well, thank you, Mark.
Thank you very much for all the plenary speakers. Now we have 15 minutes left for Q&A session. And I'd like to do is, because we have, I noticed the slide has a very popular question, and we like to ask the vision, the perspective from each of these plenary speakers. I believe this is a very important perspective. We make the data available, at the same time, we credit to this, the data collector. So the question is, as we make data more accessible, how do we ensure that data collector receive proper credit for their efforts? And I'd like to hear the perspectives from every of these plenary speakers. Who want to start?
I can start maybe.
Okay.
I think it's obviously a very important questions. I mean, in particular, when you gather all different data sets and then they are transformed to serve user needs, to make sure that the originators are well recognized. So there are aspects that are analyzed with all this DOI on the data publication and so on, but that's obviously one aspect in a series of best practices that needs to be developed that maybe we should address better. It's, I think it's very important. There are solutions that are developed to develop this data on DOI and so on, but this is an area where maybe we need to be more active.
Thank you. Who want to say a few words? Yeah.
Yes, I think this is a very good question, but it has been done very good, because usually if the data is proved to be very useful, the funding agency will continue to support that, the observations, right? So even if the data is used for a published science result, the data is acknowledged in the paper. So I think this has been done very good.
You don't think it's a big issue?
Yeah, it's not a big issue to me.
Okay. Mike? Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is a really important question. Just speaking from the perspective of the Antarctic synthesis that we did, it was very important for all of the data providers to be reassured that they were going to get some kind of recognition of their data. And I think as we move forward and we make more and more of these big synthetic studies, not just in biology but across the board, it's really, really important that the data providers get due recognition and that they don't feel left out. How you do that is extremely difficult, though. I mean, the more collaborators you have, the bigger the potential list of authors is, for example. So I think just allocating authorship is one option, but it probably becomes very unwieldy very quickly when you're doing these big sorts of studies. The DOI is an excellent suggestion. So again, with the Antarctic work, as I mentioned, we made that data set publicly available, and it's been published, and there's a DOI, so people can at least point to that as as their contribution, and they get recognition through that mechanism.
Yeah, my perspective is similar to what Mark Hindell just said. So definitely recognition is very, very relevant. So this is definitely a really good question. And it's potentially one question that we as a community need to address as well. Look for examples that have been successful in the past and try to maybe reproduce them. But something that I would like to add to that is that data owners, at least from a tracking data perspective, they of course want recognition that needs to be there, of course, but also they have other worries. They have worries that the data are misused, they have worries that the data are misinterpreted. And so I think it's not just about recognition, but it's about making sure that their data is using in the way that it should be used and not being used to things to lead to studies that might actually be inaccurate. So I think there needs to be a way to somehow capture the original intention of the data collection, and perhaps a way to address that side of things would be through this common framework for people to report data that includes very detailed metadata so that everyone knows the details about the data and how it was collected and the intention it was collected for and how it can be used and how it shouldn't be used. So I think that's another perspective that also needs to be considered when we're thinking about recognition. So of course the DOI is good, including them as co-authors is good. It has worked really well for all of the work that we've been doing with MAP. But I think it's not sustainable. It really needs to be something that keeps somehow the engagement, or at least their views, their words. I think it needs to be captured. So it's something that I think, as a community, we need to solve. We don't have an immediate answer for that. Just some thoughts.
All right, thank you all. We'd like to open the question to the audience, if any. And then if we have time, come back to a Slido question again. Yes, please. To each, please spell out who you want to ask a question to these members. Any question from the audience? Yes, I see the hands raised. We can have a couple of these questions from the audience, so please be ready. Prepared. Identify yourself, then ask a question too.
Jacqueline Boutin from CNRS L'Océan Laboratory in Paris. In addition to what was discussed about the recognition of the ocean observation, I think it's important also for the observers to get feedbacks from the modelers and from the users of the data about the information we observers are providing and what are really the needs to improve the information about uncertainties and etc.
All right, thank you. Clear the question? It's essentially try to get the feedbacks from modeler data users to the data providers.
Well, actually, when I mentioned that there is really a need of co-design, co-development between the ocean observing community and the community dealing with marine service, including modeling and data assimilation, is exactly that point. I mean, we need not only to work on requirement, provide feedback on the use of observation and the impact in models. So there will be a breakout session this afternoon on ocean weather prediction and so on. There will be discussion on this, in particular from the Ocean Predict community. But this is really one mechanism, but not only the only one. Just providing feedback on the impact, but also working with the observing system people on the design and requirement. But you're right, it's part of the interaction.
Li-Xin, you want to add a few remarks?
Yes, I think that's a wonderful questions. I think I totally agree with that the ocean observation community and the modeling community should sit together to co-design the future global ocean system. We had experience this year in South China Sea, and we have deployed almost 80 gliders and moorings. And before that, we sit together with the modelers, particularly for the South China Sea, and it's proved to be very, very useful and successful.
All right. Any more questions from audience? If not, we're going to go back to the slide or take one more question. Oh, we have, yes. Yes, please.
Hi.
Go ahead with the, yeah.
Hi, I'm Brooke. I'm with NOAA, with the Joint Institute of Marine Atmospheric Research. So we've touched on the importance of standardizing data through the examples you've used on the complexity in the models that we're now advancing towards as we continue to advance technology as well. How do we plan to continue to standardize data while seamlessly merging maybe not as standardized historical data sets?
So it's essentially the discrepancy from the data provided and the format the model requires. Both of you can address this question, I think, yeah.
I can take that one. It's a major challenge. There's no question about that. Moving forward, I think the obvious thing is to have some standards established and everybody conforms to those. But when you're doing reanalysis of existing data sets, it becomes particularly challenging, at least with the tracking data, because there's multiple platforms that tracking data come in on, there's multiple ways of analysing those tracking data. Different species have different requirements and different sorts of things that you might need to do. So I think that's why I'm really keen on this idea of having an observing network, at least for the animal tracking world, because that would be part of their task, would be to establish some of those sort of standards for dealing with those data and getting them ready to go into models. And we spoke quite a lot about that over the last 2 days at the workshop that Anna organised, and I think we made some promising progress, but there's still a long way to go.
Just adding a quick note to that.
Yeah.
Just adding a quick note, so like Mark mentioned, it's something that we discussed on just last weekend, and it was definitely one of the questions in the room at the workshop as well. So I think one key thing that we need to keep in mind is, of course, that the way we observe systems and the way we collect data, specifically about tracking animals, it's only going to increase. So it's going to be faster, there's going to be more species and age groups that are going to be able to be tracked. So it's definitely important that we do this now to ensure that the data that is to come is collected in a way that it's more efficient and interoperable. In terms of the data sets that have already been collected, and there's more than 30 years of data that have already been collected, maybe a way to bridge that gap is through the projects that we are working on. So the project that Mark Hindell just showed in the Southern Ocean, there was a huge compilation of data that is already in a specific format. It might not be the end format that it's going to be the format decided, but at least it's already ready to translate if it's needed. And the same with the other synthesis projects that we are working on. So at least what we're trying to do is to bring the existing data sets to a common format, and then if there's a new standardized way of doing it, then at least that step will hopefully be easier, at least where it's possible. So of course some of the data of the data owners might need to be still available for us to contact them to actually provide more information if it's needed. But at least through the synthesis that we are already doing, the community is already coming together. So maybe that could help bridge that gap.
Thanks, Anna. Well, I would like to ask you all to thank the speakers once again for a great morning. Eric is already here with his paddle. So a few housekeeping messages before Eric comes in. Please be back here promptly at 11:30 because we have the main panel on realities and opportunities that Laura has very nicely stitched out for us. So please be prompt. And there are also sponsor-led sessions. So please be on time. And if I can ask you all to have some high thoughts for our friends in Monaco that are trying very hardly to approve the special report on ocean and cryosphere. That might not be the best, but it's the best we could provide. So if you could all raise your thoughts to these guys, it will be very welcome. Thank you.
Thank you for a great panel. Just before you go out to the break, I want to make two announcements. First, please fill out your profile in Slido so you don't come across as anonymous. Anonymous is a lot less helpful to OceanObs than a real person. And I see on Slido that people are much more willing to vote for your questions when you're a real person. So go for that. If you need help, find a student or a younger person. And then I encourage you all to find the ocean art stage here at OceanObs 19 later this afternoon at about 5 o'clock in the exhibit hall. It features ocean-inspired art presented by members of our community in a variety of media. And so we really thank those who contributed and for the enrichment of our conference. So enjoy coffee and get to your next stop at 11:30 sharp, please.